Hello, everyone. I'm Utahime, and I am the community manager here at the Initiative Order. And I'm so excited to be able to host this wonderful interview and discussion with the amazingly talented co-owner of Two Kings Entertainment and executive producer of Tabletop News, Adam Rady. Welcome, Adam, to the Initiative Order. We are so happy to have you here, and I see chat already going off here. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with me tonight. How are you feeling?
Oh my gosh, I'm feeling pretty good. I'm wearing pants, but barely. It's in the turtle pants. So I feel
very
like
important. Very important.
Yeah, I feel like I've done the necessary homework to a point, you know? So I'm still holding on to the barest thread of civilization.
That's okay.
Really
I got the pajama pants on too. I just wish I should have put on the Sailor Moon ones. I did not do that. So I'm taking notes from you. Yes.
But no, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. And thanks to chat and the Initiative Order in general. Thanks so much for having me and for boosting the signal here today.
Yes, of course. And before we hop into things here, I just want to let everyone know who's watching. We will be taking a look at chat periodically. I think you saw that I left a little message there for you guys saying that if you do have questions, please make sure to type question in capitals and then whatever you'd like to ask our wonderful guest tonight. So that way our mods can see it and we can try to make sure that we can filter those questions over to Adam. But I would love to just hop right in and take this opportunity to allow you, Adam, to let everyone know if they are not familiar, which I hope that they know who you are. They should by now. They've seen your face on social media pretty often, I would say, recently. But let them know a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in the tabletop space and how Two Kings Entertainment came to be, pretty much.
Yeah, there's a lot to break down there, and I'm a verbose individual, so
we got time.
Brace yourselves. Yeah, brace yourselves, everybody. I'm Adam Rady. I'm the co-owner, co-founder, however you want to think about that, executive producer with Two Kings Entertainment. And I have been making nerdy things online for over a decade and almost a half. Wow. Scary to say that now out loud. But basically, much like any other young individual, I moved to Los Angeles with a hope and a dream in my eye. I figured I was going to be a super successful actor, and then I realized you had to have talent for that. So I was really at a loss for that. My best friend moved out with me, Jim Rodehaver, Evil Jim Jam, James, however you want to refer to him. I just usually refer to him as the Dark One. But he is my best friend, and we moved out together. And in 2010, I was pressuring him to write something, and he wrote a what became a screenplay and then a series of screenplays that became a web series. So then we figured we were going to be really popular with web series because the Guild was popular around that time. And we thought, well, we'll just be the next Guild. And then not realize that was actually extremely difficult. And you once again needed talent and understanding of how YouTube and the internet worked, which we didn't have any of that. So we made a show called Walking in Circles. We did that back in 2011. We cast a bunch of wonderful people that we became super huge friends with. Lamar Harris being one of them. Yeah. Eric Raddick, Crag, son of Horus, Katie Wilson, Diana Restrepo, Adam Kahn, so many others, so many wonderful people. And then I began trying to make a life for myself here in Los Angeles and started to become an editor, then a producer. And I was making various pop culture nerdy type things around sort of esports and video games and things like that. So real early on, I was kind of around doing some Twitch stuff around the 2011, 2012 mark, where they just sort of become Twitch after it was Justin TV. And I ended up being at a small studio, and I think I want to say it was 2013 or 14, we actually tried to do a live play with Lamar, and we did like two of them. Yeah, we did like two of them, and then the owner of the company was like, "What are you guys doing on my Twitch channel? No, this is not acceptable. Nobody's going to watch Tabletop online." And then we were like, "Oh, okay." So that was the end of that. years later, 2016, I was sitting in a very similar room where people were saying, well, we signed this Facebook deal in 2016 with this company I'm working for. And they say, hey, we're going to make gaming content. Does anybody have any ideas? So I raised my hand in the room and was like, we could make tabletop show. And, it was just like instantly like, eyes from the bosses, management. Yeah, and all of my coworkers were awesome because they defended me and said, "No, I think you should do it." So in the end of 2016, going into 2017, we made a show called Dragons and Stuff, which we thought was a really fun name. I once got a compliment that we were the only people who could make the title of a show sound like a verbal shrug, and I was like, "Hey, just dragons and stuff." I was like, "Hey, I like that. We're good at making shows sound like a verbal shrug." So that was pretty neat. And then they canceled that show after 9 months.
No.
We decided to take that show and make it ourselves with the help of our community. And we built a community around what became Dragons and Things, legally distinct and different from Dragons and Stuff. We had on the side created this company called Two Kings Entertainment, and Jim and I had done a little bit of work with it, but we weren't really sure what shape it was going to take. And around that time, we were like, well, now we're starting to figure out what shape that can take. So we started to produce commercials. We started to produce, obviously, our own production at that point, Dragons and Things. And then we started doing kind of some covering panels and things as the years went on for Paizo during the pandemic.
Yep.
We eventually got a studio space, which happened in January 1st, 2020. So we got to do 3 weeks of a show called Dragons and Things Phantom, which was our new, fresh, awesome idea that immediately we had to stop doing because of the pandemic and got shut down. And that's been kind of our journey as a company. We've made a lot of really cool connections being nerds and just playing in tabletop, and luckily being fortunate to be based in Los Angeles, and to our own credit, being pretty good at what we do. People have been happy with the work we've done, so we've been able to make more connections and continue to work with different companies. Sirenscape, Beetle and Brim.
Proves you wrong with the not having talent.
Well, I didn't necessarily have acting talent, or the amount that Hollywood would want me to have, and just general viewers. My mom thought it was good, but
that's important though, because mothers can be the worst critics. Let me tell you.
Well, she liked that part of it. Then everything else she had to critique, and I was okay, Mom, come on, that's a little harsh. So yeah, we've been really fortunate to work with some companies and brands, and that's I'm sure I'm sure your next question will involve tabletop news, but that's kind of what brings us to the present, which was that we got to make a lot of different connections and a lot of different things, which has allowed us sort of to be in the position that we're in now.
Awesome.
It's a very long-winded answer.
No. I'm pretty sure everybody in chat, they're here to learn as much about you as I want to know. I mean, I know you. Luckily we are friends, but at the same time, I didn't even know the origins of Two Kings Entertainment. So again, we're all learning something, and I think it's important for people to know who's behind the show. That's very important too. And so getting into that and transitioning, because that's what we like to do here, why tabletop news? Like what led to this particular concept to be developed as far as being a one-of-a-kind series just focusing on tabletop gaming industry?
The shortest answer, which I'll expound upon, I'm sure, but the shortest answer is I wanted it. I was looking around, and when I would try to look up tabletop news, I would always just be like, well, where's just like a place that just has this that I could just process rather quickly, which is not to say that nowhere exists where people are maybe covering it in a live stream or a podcast or even written articles. It doesn't mean that those individual places don't exist. The Dice Towers of the worlds, the Polygons, the wonderful folks that are already doing great things out there, the Initiative Order, folks like that. But it was just it was interesting to me that there was just like the place to go to. And so it was born from a thing where I just wanted it. I was like, well, I would like to find news rather easily, rather than maybe have to sift through different places, different destinations,
Right.
different formats. And then I was thinking about, and then from thinking about, I'll get to the next part, but I was thinking about, well, what would that look like for me? And I was noticing, just from the general landscape of the world we live in, there's a whole lot of Netflix out there.
Yes.
And HBO's is, and the Hulu's is, and then on top of that, everybody and their mother has an actual play at this point, including us. We
Yes.
have like, there's just so many actual plays and things like that. And so
There
just
are.
the breadth and just width of content is just so much of it. And I was like, okay, well, that's pretty wild. But we all want tabletop content. There's all these actual
Yes.
plays. There's all these podcasts. There's all these articles. There's all these things. And I was like, okay, well, clearly we want more.
Yes.
And I was like, well, how can we fit into that? And what if I was somebody, which I am, looking for this stuff, how would I want to get it? And I was like, well, something just short form, just something I can just get really quick on the go without really having to worry about go to a destination site or anything like that. So we're like, all right, well, how about a short episode? And then from the episode, well, what if the episode is segmented so that each segment can be cut out of it and put on Twitter or TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, so that I don't have to really go seek it out. It's just kind of coming to me anyways. So this is where this all sort of was percolating in my brain at first. And then talking to Michelle Wynn Bradley, she was like, hey, I have this idea for a tabletop news show. And I was like, really? Well, we should talk. And so we got to talking and realized very quickly that we were on the same page and wanted to do this and make this work. We had Katie Wilson, Nathan Ondrasek as producers, Jim Jam, of course, as a producer, as part of Two Kings Entertainment. So we had this crew, and that was where this all sort of started from. And it was sort of why it took the shape that it took and why it was tabletop news. And it was something that ultimately I felt like somebody at some point is going to do this, and it could be some big corporation out there, or it could be us. And I'd like it to be us. I'd like it to be the community that does it. So, yeah, it's kind of where this all has been sort of, it came together.
And coming together.
Yeah.
We did get a question from our viewers. What is your favorite tabletop RPG?
Oh gosh. I was thinking about this the other day, actually, because normally my default answer, and probably the truthful answer, is the most, I think the system that I always found really fascinating, but have never played enough of, which is why I probably still have a fondness for it, because it hasn't like worn out its welcome.
Yes.
Was they made a Firefly game a couple years ago, well,
Yes,
20 years ago now. I mean, like 15 years ago, and it was based in the Cortex system. And I found that system to be really brutal, but fascinating. I found it to be a very fascinating system. Other systems, I think, have really taken what they've done and made it, probably processed it more efficiently over the years. Now, I don't probably think it's now as good as nostalgia tells me in my head that it is, but I really enjoyed that one. And then I was thinking about it even like last night. Somebody was talking to me about Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder, and I was like, boy, it's so interesting, because obviously I cut my teeth on D&D 2nd edition, and then I played 3.5, and I was like, when did I start playing Pathfinder, and did I notice a difference? And it's funny, because nowadays we look at like 5e and Pathfinder or Pathfinder 2nd edition, and we're like, oh, well, these are different systems. And it's like, well, yeah, but like they started, so the transition was, if you transitioned way back when to Pathfinder, it really wasn't drastic. It wasn't like crazy if you went from 3.5 to Pathfinder. Obviously 4th edition was definitely different, but anyways, I've just been thinking about that a lot, and thinking about that as a gamer, that like, obviously if you jump in now, there's so many systems, but D&D and Pathfinder are different now, and they're quite different. But back then it was kind of a slow transition. So for me, it's always been hard to be like, well, where do I draw the line between D&D and Pathfinder? And I think the funny thing for gamers is like, they're all the same thing, guys. Like if you can sit at a table and roll dice, like
Yes.
they're all the same thing. We all got different
Collaborative
systems and stuff,
storytelling.
but collaborative storytelling is
Yes.
where it's at. I find that to be so cool. And yeah, the mechanics are what the mechanics are. And one thing you're going to like get out of column A or column B, but man, it's just fun to sit at a table and play games ultimately. So sorry to get a little philosophical on you there, but I was just
No, and I love Cortex as
know.
well. I play the Leverage, like based off of the show Leverage, and they had a system that was made using the Cortex Prime system. So I understand, because again, that really does lend itself to great collaborative storytelling, which I'm assuming talks like this, topics like this might come up on Tabletop News, you know?
Absolutely.
So
I think it's
all
fascinating.
connected.
It's all connected. And I mean, I just think gaming in general is fascinating because you can go as deep as you want, right? Like you could just be like, boy, I really like playing Munchkin. And I don't think anything past playing Munchkin, right? Okay, cool. Or boy, I really like making spreadsheets in Excel and writing out all of my characters' items and the weights and everything. I mean, it's you can go down the rabbit hole as far as you want, and I think any amount it has the same value as any other amount. You know, like whatever works for you works for you, and that's how you should play. Whatever works for you.
I agree. And kind of going, because you mentioned briefly, you kind of touched on it a little bit with Michelle. So I want to hear about the Tabletop News team and how, I like to say, the Avengers were assembled. What went into selecting like all of the developers and the hosts and creators who are behind Tabletop News?
Yeah, it's wild to me. And I wonder if people who are just fans of tabletop, just gaming in general, I wonder if they realize how small our industry actually is. Because you know this, Brianna, everybody knows each other or knows somebody that knows somebody else.
Yes.
It's kind of wild. Hollywood itself is actually quite small. It's bizarre how you'll meet people who are like, oh yeah, I know this and worked on this.
6 degrees of separation, really.
Oh my gosh. And sometimes it feels like it's just one between everybody, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, Michelle and I, we were all, Michelle, myself, Katie, Nathan, Jim, we were all friends before this. Like I said, we were working together. We were friends. Katie and I worked on Walking in Circles years ago, as did Nathan, as did, of course, Jim, who wrote it. And then Jared Hoy, who's one of our tech folks just in general and all around director of photography, director, guru, you know, like, so all these folks, we knew each other. We were friends. And then when it came time to figure out what was the best sort of amalgamation of what does this team look like, it was really just about like, well, who's going to have different points of view, who's going to have different ideas, and also who's available. Because ultimately, sometimes you run into a conversation where you're like, well, boy, it'd be really nice to have that person, but they're really busy. Their rates might be too much, or we don't really know them that well, or things like that. So you just say, okay, well, let's just get what we can. So that was kind of how the producers came together. And we've all been working. I mean, we've all been working for free for a year. So we've all gone a little crazy in doing that, which isn't to say that this is some new novel idea, but it's a tough thing. You know, you get stressed and you get burnt out and you go through hills and valleys, over hills and through valleys that you're feeling confident one day, and then you're feeling just completely in the gutter the next. But the hosts were the wonderful thing, because some of our producers are hosts. And then we looked around the space, once again, people we know, but also people that we thought were really talented, experienced, and had different passions. And something that I mentioned early on in our meetings as producers when we were talking about hosts was like, we went through different iterations. We were like, okay, well, what if it's just one host? And then that was very quickly like, well, no, two people's a discussion, like, and that's what we should be having, you know. And then you can have a different, somebody likes something, does somebody doesn't. So rather than just have a talking head like I'm doing right now, talking at you, you know, we wanted to have a discussion, right, between two people, which is so much better.
Yes.
You know, when we're talking, Brianna, it's so much better than just me talking.
I agree. It's really awkward for me, especially even for panels at conventions, for it to just be myself. I'm like, I want just to talk with everybody, so it's not just me. That's always
exactly. So it was really looking around the space, seeing who was experts, but who was also just passionate and who had different opinions, because it made sense pretty quickly where I was like, well, look, why would we just pick two people when the community is so much more than two people? And then it was like, well, why are we only picking the 7 that we have? And it was like, well, we're not, we're just stopping there for now before we have a show. Once we have a show, then it can be the hosts we could have. I mean, we could have so many hosts join us, and that's I think what's so exciting to a lot of us on the producer side of things is just like, oh my gosh, we can have so many different voices, so many different opinions and thoughts and experiences. So again, sorry for being so long-winded, but I think it's really exciting to think about building a thing that everybody can be a part of.
And never apologize for an answer taking a little bit longer, because it's all of that information that I know I myself, I'm sure a lot of the people who are watching would agree. It's very interesting because you don't know how it's always like it could happen at a restaurant, or it's like it's just people talking over Zoom. You never know how these ideas come about. So I think that the origin story for anything.
Do you know? I think it was. You know, I think it either was a restaurant or it was definitely, we were eating food when Michelle said to me, hey, I was thinking about this tabletop news thing. And I was like, wait a second, I'm doing that.
You're like,
so yeah, that was at a table where we were eating. Yeah.
See, proof right there. Now,
exactly.
I want to know, as far as, because we talked about how you guys got assembled, but as far as that actual process, because I think that a lot of people may not be, there's some people who may be familiar with production side of things, some that may not be. What goes into organizing and strategizing with the team to make a show like Tabletop News work?
Yeah, and it's wild to think that we've been doing it for a year, right? Most people are like, well, what does that mean? Well, you know, in truth, the first few months are easier than they are now, because at that point, you're really just dealing with a blue sky, which is the fun time, because you can just sort of throw ideas out there. And a lot of times what that looks like is groupings of us, 1, 2s, or 5 of, all 5 of us getting together in a space, whether it's on a Zoom, a lot of Google Meets. We use Slack. We could have as easily used a Discord, but everybody already has so many Discords. So we use Slack to communicate. And just throwing ideas at the wall and saying, hey, we need this, we need that. And then trying to put structure to that, right? Like that's one thing as well. Different producers have different strengths. I can tell you, first and foremost, Michelle is the most organized of any of us, and the most task oriented, which this project needs, because as you can tell, I talk a lot, and Michelle can be like, yeah, that's nice. Just what do we need to do? Stop saying the things. Just tell us what to do, or tell us yes or no on this. You know, blue or purple. Like just pick a thing. I
love those people though, because I need that too. I'm guilty of that too.
So Michelle's great. You know, Katie and Nathan are incredible ideas people, and Katie has so much experience hosting and producing hosted content. So, you know, having those type of folks come in there, and then Jim, I like, you know, I mean, obviously I'm teasing Jim because he's not on this call, and he is my best friend. We've known each other for 25 years, so it's easy for me to tease him. But, you know, this idea, like Jim usually brings a very practical sense, sometimes a pessimism, but sometimes an incredible optimism that really kind of rejuvenates the team and helps us. So oftentimes the shape of these things is just folks talking in those first early months, saying, well, I like this, I don't like that. And then, you know, having to make decisions based off of that, and doing research and talking amongst each other and talking with other people in the community to say, well, do you think this? Do you think that? And then ultimately picking a direction, because at some point you just got to pick a direction. Even if it's wrong, you got to say, this is where we're going. And we did pick different directions that we then had to be like, whoop, nope, back that up. That didn't work out. So that's a lot of what that early stages. And then at a certain point, as we were putting things together, you get yourself a pitch. And that for some people that might be a single page, for other people that might be an entire document. For us, it was more of kind of like a document with a few kind of snazzy pictures in it, and just sort of the tone, the feeling, the idea of the show, trying to take that to different companies, brands, people, and just saying like, hey, what do you think of this? Do you like this thing? Does this sound cool? And we were getting a lot of positive feedback from industry professionals, people being like, oh my gosh, the industry needs this. And so then we would be like, oh, okay, money, please. And they would be like, oh no, that's, you don't have anybody watching this thing. We just think the industry needs this thing. This is really cool. So then it was like, oh, okay, looking around the room and being like, well, I guess we could look towards maybe like a Kickstarter. And that kind of got floated. And I think we shot it down pretty early. And then we were like, well, came up a couple weeks later and we're like, well, maybe, all right, well, let's think about that. So then you start thinking about like, okay, well, what does a Kickstarter offer? And it's like, well, obviously most people instantly think of Kickstarter. You think, oh, funding, right? Donation.
Yes.
And then you're like, oh, okay, well, yes, that is ostensibly what the platform is for. But then you go, well, wait a second. There are other benefits to a Kickstarter, because it's community growth, it's community development, it's community interaction, and it's building awareness. And then from there, if you do that thing, well, if you can be successful, if you can generate interest, well, now you can go back to those early folks that thought it was a great idea and say, hey, money, please. And, hopefully they will be more inclined, because you can show that the idea you have already shown them now has, the type of merit that they're looking for, which is numbers and numbers and figures and data. So that is to say, that's where that all came from. And then we as producers who are very skilled at putting images on a screen discovered we didn't know anything about running a Kickstarter. So then we had to learn that as a crash course. So when you're asking about what the shape of this is, and I talk about a year of it, it's really going through different phases and different strategies and trying to get answers for things that I don't know what VAT is. I don't know, but I know it's in Europe, and I know it's a tax. And I know that when people buy a product from us in Europe for our Kickstarter, we got to pay VAT on it. And that's something I never, ever want to know. I don't want to know, but I have to learn it. Yeah, I have to learn it, and we have to solve it, and we have to find solutions to things that would never, ever, ever pop up in my life, but I have to solve them. And then you say, okay, well, you have to actually start this as another sort of small business because of these different ways that business works. And I'm like, well, I don't want business. I want to just make a thing.
Right.
So it's a lot of learning and a lot of processing, a lot of us taking on different roles and saying like, yeah, I'll fill out that form. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Nathan's like, Nathan just became like the grunt of just like, yes, I'll fill out the Excel sheet. I'll just make lists for you. Sure. Yeah. Whatever. Just give me lists. Also, I'm going to have my wife's going to have a baby, and we're like, oh gosh. So life happens during that year.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Well, I think that again, it's really important to have all those questions answered, because they're going to come up. So the fact that you guys are working together to make sure that you're on top of things, that's always very important, especially throughout this process, I'm sure. And you kind of mentioned a little bit of it. It kind of goes into one of the questions I had, as far as how do you explain to obviously the public why it is that tabletop news is so important to the gaming community, and what makes it so unique?
I think that this is another multifaceted answer, but I think on the surface there's so much to learn and so much to discover. That's the simple answer, right? But the more complicated answer gets to be, well, there are juggernauts at the top. We know their names. They rhyme with schmungens and schmaggins. And, there are others. And those tend to get most of the publicity. And they tend to get most of the publicity dollars, especially, even if they aren't getting a lot of the visibility. They're getting a lot of the dollars. And there are incredible creators out there, small creators, BIPOC creators, independent creators, fresh faces, seasoned veterans, all sorts of folks making content from the person and the team that made you the game that you love. There's also that little scrappy developer over there's actually also got a side project they're working on, that you wouldn't know about, or they're making dice, or they're going to offer but normally they make TTRPGs, but they're going to make a board game, and you wouldn't probably know that unless you're specifically following them. So for me, I think that it is about getting the word out there. I think it's about discovery. And I mentioned this in a different interview that I think it's also for sort of the person who is curious and interested about learning more with gaming. Meaning that normally when you sit down at a table and you play Munchkin, you play D&D, you play Magic, and you like that, you enjoy that. But man, every once in a while you just like something different, or maybe you're just kind of just a little curious about what that thing is over there. And it's like, well, we could tell you about that. But right now, you're probably only exposed to what you're exposed to, which is your friend group or the specific Twitter accounts or social media accounts that you're following. And if you're following people that play Dungeons and Dragons, you're probably going to see a lot of Dungeons and Dragons content, and that's okay. If you're playing Cthulhu, you're probably just going to see Cthulhu content, but you might get enjoyment or interest, even if it's not like I'm going to go play that game. It just might be like, oh wow, that's interesting. I didn't even know that existed. I just would be curious to learn more about that thing over there. Or boy, I'd like some new dice. Sure would be nice to know who's making dice out there. So I think it's a service is what I think of it as, that like I mentioned earlier, other industries have it. Movies have it, music has it, video games certainly has it. And I think that I don't see a reason tabletop shouldn't have it. And the fact of the matter is that in some weird ways, tabletop still kind of has a foot in sort of the past, which it should have, but it's kind of like a really hard planted foot. And it's like, well, we're gonna keep pushing this thing forward, guys. Like, I'm not talking about me, I'm just talking about just the industry is gonna keep moving and evolving. And we've been doing live plays now for, as a community for 8-9 years.
And it's already grown so much. It's already
grown so much. Global. So like there's gonna be an evolution. This is gonna continue to grow. So let's try to shape it as a community rather than letting some other entity or thing shape it for us. We might as well take our own power into this and try to shape it, because we are gamers that have been playing this thing and working in this industry for a while.
That is true. I love that too, especially when you said discovery, because I feel like I learn about a new system almost every other day. And again, it's like word of mouth, but then if that resource was there where it's like, it puts it right in front of you and it's easy to access, especially for those who are very new, because now we have a lot of people who are joining the space for the first time. It's just, it would be fantastic to have that just available. I did have a question from our audience members. What is your favorite pledge tier on the Kickstarter, and what is your favorite add-on for that?
Well, we have a lot of really cool pledges.
There were a lot of really awesome ones.
There are some really cool ones. Like we have a very unique Dogmite GM screen. You can only get it through the Kickstarter. It will never be sold anywhere else. So that's unique and cool. We have really cool t-shirts and the normal things that you would think of in that regard. But I think that the one that always stands out to me that I always tell people about, and I think does get mentioned by others too, but it's a cool one. We have a $75 tier where you get obviously everything below it, which includes a printed poster, a digital poster, all sorts of access and cool things like that. But you also get the soundtrack, and we're calling it a soundtrack, but it's not really a soundtrack. What it is it's an album of music and ambience that is inspired by our talent. So if you ever wanted to know what would it sound like to be at a table with Becca Scott? What would it sound like to be playing games with Carlos Luna? What would it sound like to join a battle, with Katie Wilson? Like what? These are ambiences and music tracks. I believe it's, if I'm doing the math correctly and if I'm remembering correctly, I believe it's 3 music and 2 ambience for each of our current hosts. So it's 35 tracks and it's all loopable. You can use it at your table or just listen to it on your own. You could play any type of game with it if you enjoy, one particular track over another. You could play it at your game table, and you can play them online too because they're copyright, royalty free. You can do with them whatever you want and play with them. So I think that's a really cool one. We did have some dice at that tier, but I believe they've sold out. So now we just have the standard soundtrack. And again, I call it soundtrack, but it's just a cool inspired album, which I think it'll be eclectic because each host is different, so like.
I always think of like the Spotify playlist that people make for their characters. That inspiration.
Exactly. So imagine cycling through 7 characters all on a playlist. It'll be fun.
Now, kind of staying on the topic of the Kickstarter, for people who may not be familiar with what goes into having to actually develop and create a Kickstarter and launch it. Did you experience any obstacles during that process of trying to launch it? And how did you overcome that? Because I feel like if there are people who are watching who are thinking about kind of, putting something that they're passionate about on Kickstarter, and they don't know where to start, it's always great to hear from people who have basically put in that legwork, especially you said you guys have been working on this for over a year now.
Yeah, I mean, lessons learned from Kickstarters. Let's start with number 1. Definitely try to get some exposure out there early on, right? Don't try to keep your secret too secret for too long. Definitely feel free to sort of get that messaging out early. What was it? It was the pre-launch page is your friend. That's an amazing resource for you that basically just allows you to pretty much collect emails. You don't get those, like we don't have access to those emails, but Kickstarter sends out an email that says, hey, the Kickstarter is live if you were to get people to sign up for that ahead of time. I think that's an incredible tool. So I think that's something really, really beneficial that I think you can do at a super low lift. All you need to know is what your project is, like a tagline and a picture. That's it. That's all you need on that pre-launch page, and you can put that up as early as you want and just be building out that list for a long, long time, as long as you want it to be. I think some of the other obstacles that we ran into was the idea of what is the actual value of a thing? Because we have to buy the thing. There is money that must be exchanged for us to buy the reward. What is the perceived value of that thing? Because you might look at the thing that we're like, oh geez, that costs $20, and you might look at it and be like, well, I could buy that for $15 off Amazon. And we're like, okay, yeah, well, shoot, you can, but we can't buy them that cheap because we need to buy bulk and what I mean. Because we're doing custom, whatever it is. So there's that, and then there's the idea of okay, well, there's the actual value, the perceived value. Then there's well, how do you balance that against your Kickstarter rewards? And then how do you decide where you're going to send that to? Are you going to send it worldwide? What does worldwide really mean? Aren't there places that are at war? You probably can't send places there. Are there places that don't have shipping or have astronomical shipping or charge a VAT? What is a VAT? I don't know, but it's a thing that's in Europe, and you better care about it.
I know now. I know I will know what a VAT is now after this. So I appreciate it.
I'm just telling you. You better do some. So, we had to find a fulfillment partner, somebody, some company, some entity that could hold our hands through it and walk us through it and say, this is what you need to worry about, what you need to do, and what you need to pay me to do that. And we're like, oh, okay. So, all right, we got to do that. So I think that those are, some of the most obvious and sort of things that pop out to me the most right away. And then there's just the well, how do you structure your Kickstarter page? How much is too much information? What's too little? What do you what do you put first? What do you put second? Is this pretty enough? Does it look nice? Does it look too nice? One of the things that I'll just say that we've run into as a brand that has been really funny to me is that people, because the world is so fast and going so quickly,
Yes.
I totally get it. I don't blame anybody for this, but a lot of people's initial reaction to us is only 2 seconds. And it's because you're scrolling, because you're moving, you're just doing life. You're just on social media. Why do you care about this thing that just popped up in your feed? You just don't know. And so a lot of times initial reactions to us are like, oh, well, why does this company that's clearly successful need my money? Why would they possibly ask me for Kickstarter? They look so nice. And it's like, oh, well, we took a year of development to make this look really nice. And like, we have skill at making things look nice. So oops. Maybe we should have made it look worse, then people wouldn't like think that we just already have it in the bag. I mean, I'm only giving a slight aside here because I just got to call it out because it's so funny. There is a comment on one of our videos, and I'll just call it out. I don't know who wrote it, and it's fine. They again, I think it was just probably somebody who just didn't have the information, and they wrote the comment and said, they said, here they ask for a Kickstarter in their $1,000 chairs with their Matt Mercers. This is just Venn TV 2.0. And I was like, this is an amazing compliment that you don't mean as a compliment, but calling us Venn TV 2.0 is hilarious to me, because if anybody knows anything about Venn, which you probably don't because nobody watched it, but it was a network that had millions upon millions of dollars thrown at it and went out of business in less than a year, much like G4.
Unfortunately.
But the crazy thing there is that person's looking at us thinking that we're Venn, and I'm like, holy cow, you think we have the production quality of that? Man, that's odd. That's what an incredible compliment that you maybe didn't even mean to give us, but wow, what a great statement. Because I'll tell you what, if I had 0.5% of their budget, we wouldn't need the Kickstarter, but like, I just don't have that. So anyways, I find that to be really fascinating for a Kickstarter is make sure it looks good. Make sure you have a representation of what your product is, but do weigh it against certain things, or at least be ready to give people the answers to understand and the context to understand, like, oh, we're skilled producers, so we can make a thing look good, but we don't have the money to make a thing look good every single week. So it's just an interesting
thing. Making sure
to
explain that and address it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Now, going on the opposite end of the spectrum here, and on a different note, what would you say you're most proud of? Is it the fact that the aesthetic is so nice that people are already thinking you're millions of dollars in on this thing, or was there something else that you guys accomplished that you're really excited, you were really just proud of and happy about while you guys have been working on this Kickstarter?
There's always a proud feeling to look at a thing and go, wow, look at we made that thing, right? Like, so just the Kickstarter page itself is just, I think it looks really nice. I think it's cool. That's a good feeling. The very promotional promotional materials we have, the teaser, the images we have from the photo shoots, those have been really great moments. I think what has probably been one of the most rewarding and fulfilling aspects is when we've launched a Kickstarter and people that are not my mom, that are not my friends,
hi, Mom.
That I don't know personally, have decided to take money out of their paycheck or their company. We have sponsors that have looked at our stuff and have, backed us at the sponsorship tier without ever really even talking to us, just looking at it and going, I believe in what you're doing. And I mean, that is just such a good feeling to be like, wow. People see value in this in the way that we see value in it and want it to succeed. So I think that's got to be the most fulfilling thing. Is just this idea that a community can form around a thing, which is what we always dreamed of. We've been dreaming of, but it's like, it's real. It's happening around us and to us. That's really cool.
That is wonderful. Now, I know that actually someone from the audience it ties into one of the questions I actually had as well. So as far as tabletop news, getting past the Kickstarter, out in the world, and I know you guys have already mentioned that the episode will exist across all social media platforms, and that's definitely no easy task, as we've already established. But can you walk us through what basically would go into an episode? Like if someone is tuning in for the first time and, you know, say that everything's funded and it's off to the races, what is that going to look like?
Yeah. So first off, time frame wise, definitely this year, summer. I think summer is what we're ultimately targeting, because there does have to basically be some groundwork we have to lay between the end of the Kickstarter to production. And also, as we've been explaining, Kickstarter itself is a production. So we also have to kind of, in a weird way, wrap up that production before we can move on to the other production, which I think is what does maybe throw some projects in other areas maybe for a loop, is because they're like, well, no, I just want to go make the thing. And it's like, well, yeah, but you also got to like finish the thing, because you told all these people you were going to give them the thing. So like, you got to do that, because if you don't do that, they're going to go real mad. So so the point is, there is going to be a bit of a gap just by necessity. It shouldn't, in theory, shouldn't be much more than, you know, a couple months before an episode appears. So it should be summer. But what that looks like from a very practical standpoint is, we don't have a show right now. We basically have 5 producers and a whole bunch of hosts. So what we have to do is we have to say, okay, and we've been doing obviously some of this legwork. We obviously know what the budget entails and things like that, but now we need to go into a hiring process, find the right people for the right jobs, but also do a little, just a little bit of troubleshooting, to be perfectly honest, because when you're making something that has never been made before, and maybe people may not know this, in filmmaking and in general, and film projects, it's always good to have some sort of test. Usually these things are called pilots. In fact, people have been asking us about that on Kickstarter. So we want to film a pilot, because a pilot will help us identify all of the problems we just can't, you can't have in your head till you go try to do the thing. You just don't know. You know, you can build the car, you think you got it, but as soon as you hit the gas, just nothing happens, you know?
You gotta test it.
Yeah, you have to test it and figure out what works. And we want to try to break things, to be perfectly honest, because we want to make sure that once we go into production, once you go into a weekly production, you can't fall off the tracks. So we need to make sure going into that we've got sort of our ducks in a row. Used a lot of analogies and metaphors there, but
I love it. It's fantastic.
Basic idea there. So what it will ultimately entail when there is a show every single week is a writing and research team. So researchers that are actively going out there and looking for news stories, not just trying to pull stories from other sources, actively trying to find them, actively trying to outreach to the community and getting outreach from the community. Because if the numbers are at all anywhere accurate, and the industry is 10 billion, 20 billion, $30 billion industry, there's so much out there that no one person or entity could ever possibly cover it all and know it all. So we do need help. We need people to tell us things. So research team that is full time at that point, because they're going to need to be working. And so that's not an inexpensive endeavor to have a full-time group of individuals doing anything. So let alone research. Okay, cool. Then we need writers to write the thing. We need a crew to film the thing. We need the talent to be in the thing. And then we have to have the editors to edit the thing. And we have to do that part all very, very quickly, because otherwise the news is not relevant to you. Based around all of that, we also need a social media team who can now take all those videos and put them on the social media in the way that they need to be formatted to you, and get you all the metadata and all the tags and all the things to make sure they go out to you in the right way. And then we have to do that every single week. And hopefully, if we're doing well, if we're doing well enough, we want to be doing that in a way where in between those episodes, we're also providing some type of service or mechanism for you to get more information. Whether that's just simple tweets, or if we're able to do anything other ancillary video or anything, that's all going to come down to budget, sponsors, and our ability to do so. But, you know, we'd like to aspire to be able to provide content regularly more often. But yeah, that's going to be a big ask. And then it's a thing where it's like, well, just do that for forever, right? Like, I mean, it's at that point, you know, like,
keep it going.
if you'd all follow Sports Center doesn't really take a week off. It's just every single day, right? And so you're like, oh, okay, well, I guess we just do it for forever.
And what was the tagline? Because you guys did say it was Sports Center meets
Tabletop. Yep.
Tabletop. There we go. That combination.
Exactly. Yeah, so it is definitely an endeavor, and one that we've thought a lot about, but does require a lot of sort of spinning plates, and figuring out how to do those.
For sure, to make it work.
Exactly.
I guess we got the feedback on that. So
I see
the
Danny
value added tax, broadly based consumption tax assessed on the value added to goods and services, usually 20%. See, again, the more you know. I just need that to go across the screen, which I don't.
It basically means, it basically means whatever we sell you, we have to pay the governments of the EU or whoever charges the VAT in this case. We have to pay them 20% of whatever you bought. So that's what that is. That's an additional tax, which is it's steep. It's a thing.
It is, yeah. And now we know about it for sure.
Yeah.
But I definitely want to congratulate you and the entire team for literally reaching past 100K already, and getting even closer to your Kickstarter goal. Boo, 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 boo. I wish I had that like noise effect. I don't. So it's a boo, 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 boo. But that is no easy task. And, I just had to go and put that out there because I know that also too, we have other people and supporters in the chat as well who are cheering you guys on. For those who maybe just found out about Tabletop News and they want to try to help support and get you guys over that goal, and go beyond plus ultra, where can they do that, and how can they go about doing that?
Yeah, not a problem. We, I believe, I'm actually double checking this because, and the social team's going to kill me for this. I think I'm typing it in on mine real quick. I want to make sure. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So it basically, it's tinyurl.com/tabletop news. That is, or you can go to any of our social medias at Watch Tabletop. At Watch Tabletop will get you where you need to be.
Do the thing, guys. Do the thing. Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. We got the Nightbot.
That's awesome.
Our mod team is on it, putting
That's
that
great.
information in the chat for us. Thank you.
Yes, and please follow us. Please share. Please donate if you're able to, and if not, just get the word out there and let people know about it, and just help support if you would like to see the idea of Tabletop News out there in the world. We would love to have your help doing it.
Yes, please do, everyone. I know that I did myself because of the fact that I think it's such an amazing concept and idea, and I would love to see it come to fruition and happen, and especially being a part of the community, and it's made by people in the community who are passionate about it. That's the most important thing, that passion that goes into it, and that dedication as well. So I would just want to thank you once again for taking time to sit down and chat with us and share all about this phenomenal new show. And Adam, if you could just let everyone know where they can find you, and if you have anything maybe coming up for yourself, or more stuff to look forward to from the Tabletop News crew.
Absolutely. First off, everybody, don't follow people, follow your heart. But if you do want to follow me, I'm at Hatless Wizard. You can find me anywhere with that tag. I would also prefer at this point that you do follow Watch Tabletop. If you're someone who's already following your heart, make sure you're also following Watch Tabletop. That would be great. Watch Tabletop, Tabletop News. We have our live streams going sort of each week, Mondays and Wednesdays. I believe we're actually adding some more potentially in the coming weeks. But next, this upcoming Monday, we are going to be having folks join us for our big weekly stream, our weekly endeavor, in which we play various board games and find different ways to have you, the audience, add chaos to them. We just did one with Matt Mercer. He was kind and gracious enough to come into our studio to lend his voice and his support of Tabletop News, which was incredible. He played Pretty Pretty Princess with us. He dominated and won 2 games of Pretty Pretty Princess. So if you're at all interested in just some chaos and fun, join us there. That's just kind of our way to unwind. That's not what Tabletop News necessarily will be, but it's a great way to kind of get a feeling for who we are and how we play games.
Definitely. And I've been your host, Utahime, and I had an absolute blast with you, Adam. Thank you so, so much again for joining us here on the Initiative Order. And thanks everyone in chat for your questions and all of your comments and the energy that you guys brought to chat. I really appreciate you guys tuning in today. And I hope you all have a wonderful night. And thank you so much for joining. Until next time, guys. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.